Very good morning to you. Just for legal reasons, I need to point out that Marianne Foster does not demand cut flowers on her desk. I don't want to get in trouble again for that sort of thing. Right, PMQs Unpacked is coming. Tim Shipman is going to be joined by comedian Al Murray to pause the action live from the House of Commons. Al Murray is on his way, so we'll get his take on it. But for the second week of our brand new feature, it's time for PMQs Pre-Packed, where one of Jane and/or Fee from the afternoons comes on to predict what's going to happen. We listen to what happens, then I go on Jane and Fee's show just after 3 o'clock, and I award points on the basis of how well they did. Last week it was Fee's go, which means this week it's Jane's go. Jane, how are you?
I'm all right. It's quite a lot of pressure, this. I thought it might be fun, but it isn't really.
There we are. And there is Times Radio's mission statement.
Well, yeah, actually, stick that on a T-shirt.
Stick that on a T-shirt. Yeah. So last week, I think I ended up awarding
3.
I said 3, then she taught me down to 2 out of 5.
She's too modest. I
because
think
she
at least
thought it was
3.
going to be all post office, then it wasn't, because Rishi Sunak did his announcement and he did a lot of questions sort of on Rwanda and things like that. So what would you think Keir Starmer should talk about this week?
Well, I would like him to ask, who does Rishi Sunak think will be Prime Minister when the first migrant flight leaves for Rwanda?
Very good.
Now, I thought of that at about 20 to 3 in the morning.
Yeah, it's good.
Not bad, is it?
Were you just coming in or just getting up?
Oh, just coming in. I'm crazy. Obviously, inflation. Surely there'll be a question about that today.
Yeah.
I know that you could say, well, they did make their target towards the end of last year, get it, but now it's going up again. That can't be a good thing.
Yeah.
Of course, you could also say, well, it's not really within the government's gift.
But if you're going to take the credit in the good times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would go for that too. I quite like Keir Starmer to ask about whether Rishi Sunak shares Mr. Hollinrake's belief that some people should end up behind bars for the Horizon scandal.
Yeah.
The Houthis in Yemen, would Rishi Sunak sanction another attack? And if so, would that be the right thing to do? Because we're not sure that the first strike has had quite the impact it was intended to have. Yeah. And then I really hope somebody raises the subject of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Yes.
Because I know it's very difficult to cover what's going on there because obviously independent reporters are not allowed in.
Yeah.
But from what we do know, it's just desperate.
And given the journey that Keir Starmer's been on in terms of his position on, the Israeli response, actually, he, politically in terms of managing his own party,
I would have thought
a question or two on that
would be
some of those on the left who thought he was too pro-Israel at the beginning.
Yeah, because I feel that already it's not quite fading, but it's not getting the focus it was getting even 10 days ago.
I suppose to some extent it's a bit like the conversation we had about why wasn't more covered about the post office scandals. Well, because other things come along in the news, and by definition, the new, and 100 days is a long time in a news cycle. But and the fact that getting pictures and voices out of
actually, and Fujitsu and their government contracts.
Yes.
How many have they acquired very recently?
Yeah.
And if so, was that the right thing to do?
There was an extraordinary moment with the Fujitsu boss, was it the select committee? Where
Mr. Patterson.
Yeah. And he was asked, sort of, why didn't you do much?
Well, he said
you knew there were problems. Why did you sit back and do nothing about it? And he says, I don't know. I wish I knew, but I just don't know.
I thought that suggested a man without guile.
Yeah. Very good. Well, we look forward to that. I will see you just after 3 o'clock for PMQ's Unpacked.
Looking forward to it.
Over here then. Right, stay tuned. Tim Shipman, Al Murray, pausing the action live from the House of Commons next on Times Radio.
On DAB Digital Radio, on the Times Radio app, and on your smart speaker. Politics from every angle. Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley, and this is Times Radio. In a moment, PMQ's Unpacked with Tim Shipman and Al Murray. But first, a look at the headlines this lunchtime. Social services in Lincolnshire are urgently reviewing how a toddler they were meant to visit weekly starved to death. Bronson Battersby was found dead next to his father, who had a heart attack 2 weeks after they were last seen. Inflation was 4% for December, the first time it's increased since February. It's slightly above November's 3.9% figure. The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, asked for urgent talks with Fujitsu to agree compensation for sub-postmasters wrongly convicted in the Horizon IT scandal. the tech company was behind the faulty software. Yesterday, its European chief executive apologised to victims of the scandal. And Pakistan's recalled its ambassador from Iran over a rocket strike it says was an unprovoked violation of Pakistani airspace. It's also banned the Iranian ambassador from re-entering Pakistan. He's currently visiting his home country. We'll have a full news roundup in an hour's time on Times Radio. But now, live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, order. I call Matt Chorley and Tim Shipman.
And Tim Shipman's here. Tim Shipman, how are you?
I'm very excited.
You're very excited because we've got a special guest again.
Yes,
We've
I listened to his podcast and everything.
We've previously had Peter Dixon,
Yes.
who does the voice on the X Factor, Zippy from Rainbow, and now,
You've basically got to be better than Zippy now. That is the task.
well, I think the first Al Murray, comedian Al Murray. Welcome to Times Radio.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
The main thing you could do is sound like Zippy, which the Zippy.
All right, I can't remember. Okay, yeah, fine, yeah.
You
know you, George.
Yeah, he does. It's very good. It was very good. Now,
How's your bungle?
Ceaseless. My bungle is ceaseless.
now you're probably you're a proper observer of politics.
Well, I mean, we've got no option, have we? We have to keep a close eye on this thing, don't we? Especially now we're coming to the end of the. This is the very end of the Return of the Jedi, isn't it? In terms of Tory governments, they've shot the Ewoks. Yes, I mean, I do. I find the whole thing sort of bitterly fascinating.
And you famously stood against Nigel Farage.
No, and the other candidates.
And the other
Craig
candidates.
McKinley. I mean, please. Otherwise, we're back to my old Twitter feed of 2015, which is just, why do you hate democracy?
Yeah.
Well, what, by running an
Well,
election?
standing an election. Standing an election. So who do you think's got more chance of becoming an MP next, Nigel Farage or you?
Well, obviously, we're being told that Nigel Farage is the sort of lurking in the fog that will emerge. I mean, he very often he gets sort of presented as, he's asleep under a landmark, and all that needs to happen is he needs to awake to rescue the right. But I don't know. He doesn't seem interested, does he?
There was a poll saying he would win in Clacton-on-Sea. So I don't know how you feel about a pretty cold seaside town.
Well, I
in
would
November
never
out.
do it again. I would
Really?
never do it again. No, because it was incredibly annoying, the whole thing. And also the other thing is I came away.
Was it just a joke that got out of hand?
It was a joke that got out of hand, and I came away from the whole thing dangerously sympathetic towards politicians because. The demand is that they fail. The demand is that the expectation is they're lying. The demand is that they fail, and that tends to be what kind of happens to them, and they get eaten by the machine. And the thing. I mean, my PR's with me, who happily acted as my spin doctor. He
joined.
And when we did the thing where I was going to be parachuted into the constituency, literally.
Yeah.
So we'd.
I remember this story.
Yeah. And we'd booked the jump and booked the plane and everything, and the press came to the airfield, and then it turned out that I was too fat, right, to jump. My daughter's
Boris on the zip wire.
Well, my daughter's bathroom scales, it turns out they'd been tampered with. So
okay, that's
exactly. That's what
explanation.
happened.
Yeah,
So they ring me up. They go, "You've got to be under 90 kilos." I get the pink scales from out under the toilet. Stand on them. Yeah, I'm. And then we get through all of the procedure, and they do all the training. And they explain how I'm going to jump, and then the last thing is, you get on the scales and get your credit card out. And I got on the scales. And said, "Well, that's it. You can't do it." So we then had to spin this disaster of not being able to actually parachute. And I just thought, this is too stressful. I want to write my jokes, tell my jokes, and go home. And and that it didn't work out like that.
So that's where we are. That's where we are now. No, I've just realized the last time you came into Parliament once, we went and watched PMQs.
Yes, we did. Yeah,
And
it
then
was
we went
Theresa May's first day.
And we went and had
God,
lunch
remember
afterwards.
that,
And we
yeah.
emerged from lunch, and there'd been a terror attack in
That's
Westminster.
right,
We
that's
missed it because
right.
we'd been at lunch. So fingers crossed, it won't be quite so dramatic today.
Yes, let's hope that we
fingers
can
crossed.
Just how punchy are the ERG going to be getting later?
Exactly.
That's the
Right.
question.
Here we go. Then let's go live to the House of Commons. This is question number 1 from Keir Starmer.
can I send my best wishes to the honourable member and his father also, and all those suffering in this way? Mr. Speaker, I can't let today pass without saying how saddened I was by the tragic death of Bronson Battersby, aged just 2, who died in heartbreaking circumstances in Skegness. I know that this House will join me in sending our deepest sympathies to his family. Mr. Speaker, the government has been forced to admit that it has lost contact with 85% of the 5,000 people earmarked for removal to Rwanda. Has he found them yet?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the honourable gentleman is that in spite of him blocking every single attempt that we have taken, we have managed now, because of our actions, to reduce the number of people coming here by over a third last year, remove over 20,000 people from this country back to their home countries, carried out 70% more illegal enforcement raids, arrested hundreds of people, closed down thousands of bank accounts, and processed over 100,000 cases, the biggest number in over 20 years, Mr. Speaker. That's because on this side of the House, we want to stop the boats, we have a plan, it's working, and with him, we would just go back to square one.
Oh, I think we might be getting a few of those, so I think we'll start clocking in, just going back to square one. So he's chosen to go on Rwanda again, which is what he did last week, Tim. And knowing that it's just ferments dissent on the backbenchers,
and he wants to cause as much grief as possible for Sunak with his backbenchers, doesn't he? And he's forced Sunak to trot out this collector's item list of very exciting things that they've been doing.
Which, if he didn't have the Rwanda Bill and just kept reading out that list, it sounds quite good.
Right,
yeah,
yes.
I mean, I've been watching a lot of 24 Hours of Police Custody recently, and I think, Sunak should just say no comment to everything at the moment. He's reached that stage of the process where the answer to every question should just be no comment. And we'd get through this whole thing a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't
be more in the dark.
Things would be just as clear, and he wouldn't be offering so many sort of possible lines to the opposition. I have to say the argument he presents there that the opposition are opposing what we're doing isn't the strongest politics, is it? I mean, there's clues in the name, mate.
But also, I mean, it's also just not true. When he says, in spite of him blocking every single attempt, they haven't blocked it.
Well, I know they haven't.
Actually, everything that Rishi Sunak wanted to do, he has been able to do.
Well, and the only people liable to block what he's doing now are sitting on behind him.
Oh, come on, it's beautiful. The current state of play is are you not entertained by this? Like that you can have this big a majority and be in this mess. It's gorgeous.
It's more the Black Knight than Gladiator, I would say.
Yeah, well, yes, I think so.
Yeah.
What you're going to do, bleed on me at this stage, is how the Prime Minister is approaching politics.
It's not gone down very well, people watching on YouTube. Kadir says that was the worst possible answer. I mean, we've still got five more goes at that.
No comment. No comment.
Right, let's see if it gets any better.
Are you the Prime Minister? No comment.
Let's go back to the House of Commons. This is question number 2 from Keir Starmer.
My first thought is, how do you actually lose 4,250 people? Then you remember that this is the government that scrapped HS2, but the costs are still rising by billions. This is the government that spent £400 million of taxpayers' money on a Rwanda scheme, yet can't deport a single person. And this is the government that waged a week-long war on the Greek Prime Minister for reasons known only to themselves, and suddenly are reminded that, of course, this farce of a government could lose the people it was planning to remove. But he didn't answer the question, so I'll ask him again. Where are the 4,250 people that the government has lost? Where are they?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, we've actually identified and removed over 20,000 people from this country back to where they belong. But he asks these questions about the Rwanda scheme, Mr. Speaker. It is important that we get this up and running, because it's important, as the National Crime Agency say, that we have a working deterrence to resolve this issue. That's indeed how Australia solved this problem, and Albania has worked for us. But we know he asked these questions, Mr. Speaker, about the detail of these things, but we all know he doesn't actually care about solving this problem, and we know this because when the BBC asked him about the Rwanda plan, they quizzed him and they said, if the numbers crossing the channel on small boats decline, i.e. so it's working, would you still reverse it? The Labour leader said yes. It's crystal clear he doesn't have a plan, and it will be back to square one.
Another back to square one.
Square one.
I mean, losing the 4,000 people, no comment would have worked quite well there, I think.
Yeah, I think
or at
so.
least if he'd had the nerve to say, I've got a very large sofa and they're hiding behind
Well, they're
it.
staying at the Ritz, aren't they? As I
in-
understand it.
Keir Starmer's question, if you've lost something, by definition, you don't know. I mean, it's like when you can't find your keys, and someone said, well, when did you last have them? If nobody knew that, they wouldn't be lost.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're the last place. Yeah, exactly. The last place you had them. Yeah,
I like the idea of the week-long war on the Greeks, though. I mean, that may be a good course of action for the government. You know, if in doubt, start a small war. That might be one we could actually win.
I thought he was sort of starting to mount together the sort of thing that we've talked in recent weeks, Tim, that Keir Starmer's missed the opportunity of like taking a whole load of threads and tying them all together. This isn't working, that isn't working.
Yeah.
And so as he talked about how you've lost 4,000 people, they scrapped HS2, but the costs are still going up. They went back to Rwanda again. I mean, you'd have to be quite specialist to remember the row with the Greek Prime
It's a
Minister
bit
over the
niche,
Elgin
isn't it,
marbles.
really?
I mean, it's quite a lot of other things.
Well,
going
it's
on.
like it's aimed at the listeners to this show.
Surely not.
You know, people who listen to this show, they remember that.
They remember,
the
and the
public.
king, because then the king got involved, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
With all the Greek tie.
There you go. See, maybe that'll be in the next question.
No, Sunak's answer to be boring for a moment is not a bad one, which is that, you know, even if this was working, Starmer would get rid of it.
Yeah.
You know, which will have an impact with some voters.
To which the
maybe
response
not
is,
ones listening to this show.
But it's not working.
Well, that will then quite.
So anyway, let's go back to the House of Commons there. The question number 3 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, spending £400 million on a plan not to get anybody to Rwanda whilst losing 4,000 people is not a plan. It's a farce. Only this government could waste hundreds of millions of pounds on a removals policy that doesn't remove anyone. Only this government could claim that it's going to get flights off the ground only to discover they couldn't find a plane.
Sunday Times
Only
story,
this
that.
government could sign a removal deal with Rwanda, only to end up taking people from Rwanda to here. But he still hasn't answered the question. So I'll try again. What progress has he made in locating the 4,250 people his government has apparently lost? He's dodged it 3 times. Where are they?
Let's just jump in there. In terms of the Al Murray as an expert of these things, is this working comedically? Only this government. I mean, it has the rhythm and sound of a joke.
I mean, comedically is. You're doing an awful lot of work there, and then of course, you know, like there are the categories of joke, aren't there? There's a joke you'd use on stage. There's a joke you put in a novel. There's a joke you'd say in Parliament, right? From funniest to least funny, just to help anyone who wasn't sure of the taxonomy there.
The bar is low on the third
The
one.
bar
I'm
is
not
very,
sure
very
he's
low on the
quite
third
clearing
one.
it.
But yeah, I mean, he's basically creating a comedic rhetorical trap here for the Prime Minister, and I think he you know, it's kind of serviceable in that regard. And what I quite liked was how that. I mean, was it a triple negative?
Yeah.
You know, that this thing is so sort of complicated and gnarly that Starmer is having to sort of resort to triple negatives and all this sort of thing to point out. You know, they can't find a plane and all this sort of thing.
So he's got the rule of 3.
I mean, but you're about to go on tour, aren't you?
Removals.
I mean, is this the idea? Are you picking Starmer's brains for jokes here?
I mean, I've got a lot of blank pages of there now, so I'm basically working out, should I take that? Am I taking that one? I think we're going to leave that.
What I find strange about this approach a little bit is that he seems to be trying to make out that this is a uniquely incompetent Conservative government. anyone who can remember the previous two might wonder whether that's
well, because
accurate.
the flights plan without any planes is
that dates all the way back
to Chris Grayling and
Yeah.
the ferry company that didn't own any ferries.
But isn't this? I mean, the Tory government here is working on a rule of three, isn't it? This is the third funniest of the lot, isn't it? Isn't that where he could go there with that?
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
he? You know,
Andy's been in touch as well to say, because if we get square one again, if things have deteriorated, isn't square one a better place than we are now? So actually,
Yeah, that
like,
would be
Keir
back,
Starmer-
back at
Keir
zero.
Starmer could say,
because you at
yes,
least know what square one
if we go
is.
back to square one, so we forget the Tory government, we go back to how it was under the last Labour government. They should reclaim square one. Anyway, let's find out. I can't remember what the question was. But,
I don't know, but there's going to be an answer. of
there's
some-
going to be an answer which is going to use the phrase.
No comment.
There's going to be an answer which uses the phrase back to square one. I imagine. This is Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, it's the same thing again and again. Here we are talking about what we are doing, but I'm happy to go over it, Mr. Speaker. What are we doing? We've increased the number of illegal enforcement raids by 70%, leading to thousands of arrests, using powers, Mr. Speaker, that he blocked in this House. We have closed
block
down
them.
thousands of
Tried to.
bank
He opposed
accounts
them.
of illegal
Opposed them,
workers, again, using powers that he blocked, Mr. Speaker.
Opposed.
Order. Mr. Do you want that early cup of tea, or are you going to be a little bit more silent? Prime Minister.
How can you be a
And
bit
Mr.
more
Speaker,
silent?
as I said, we have worked through a
Lindsay Hall
record
ticking
number
off a
of
Labour
cases
MP.
and returned a record number of people back to where they've come. All of that is a plan that is working, and we can see that it's working because the numbers of people coming to this country are down by over a third, Mr. Speaker. But again, it is a bit rich to hear him in here pretending that he cares about how we actually stop the boats when he's been crystal clear. He's been crystal clear and said that even if the plan is working to reduce the numbers, he would still scrap it, Mr. Speaker. It's because he has no values, no conviction, and no plan. It is back to square one.
Hey!
Is the idea here that the would-be immigrant goes, God, nothing works in Britain. I won't go there then. Is that what they? Is that what?
Oh, is that the idea? Yeah,
is that what
maybe.
he's aiming at here?
Yeah, the
God,
schools are falling
they
down,
can't
the
string a
trains
policy.
aren't
Nothing
running, yeah.
works anymore. Yeah, exactly. They can't find a ferry. I won't bother going
I'm
there.
off to Greece. It's warmer there.
It's warmer. Well, the whole point is there are far more asylum seekers in Greece. It's a few of them who reach here, which is why I don't know, working cooperatively together in some way with European countries might be a. Anyway, that's just
have no
madness,
idea what you're
madness,
talking about.
madness, absolute.
Well, they have a lot of upstream work, as they call it. I think they would say at that point, Matthew.
Yeah, up your stream as well. Because Lindsay Hall had to deal with some shouting there, what's your best tactic for dealing with hecklers, Al?
Oh, I get my retaliation early. I think what Hoyle's doing wrong is he should start PMQs by basically roasting the front four rows of both sides of the House before he calls Starmer to ask his first question.
I saw Stuart Lee on Monday night. He spent the whole first half of the show just having a go at the audience. So.
But won't it get repetitive? Because what he's done, and what do you do? And what do you do?
Well,
with
I
the
think it's
rows
a
and rows of
pertinent
MPs.
question with this mob, isn't it?
You'd be struggling with some of the Labour front bench, it's true to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, because of course Rachel Reeves isn't there because she's in knee deep in Davos.
Well, that means there's only half the people that most people recognise.
Have government people gone to Davos?
Yeah, I think David Cameron's going and Jeremy Hunt's going.
They're very at home there, aren't they? Those
Yeah,
two?
yeah.
Send, horses for courses.
Very old school. That the idea of Cameron rocking up at Davos, isn't it? It's like smacks of.
Wasn't there a story I remember when they went to Davos with George Osborne? They spent hundreds and hundreds of pounds on a cheese fondue or something during austerity, which we obviously kept us going for weeks.
I mean, good times. The cheese fondue during austerity, good times. I mean, that was all they had to worry about.
Yeah, exactly.
Was a fondue.
It was a cheese fondue, brought down by a cheese fondue. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons then for the fourth time of Keir Starmer asking something complicated about Rwanda, and then Rishi Sunak saying back to square one.
He hasn't got a clue where they are, has he? I could tell.
Bit of crowd
I can
work.
tell you one place they aren't, and that's Rwanda. Because the only people who sent to Rwanda is cabinet ministers. And for all the word, the ridiculous thing is, we know the Prime Minister himself doesn't even believe in this Rwanda gimmick. He had to be talked out of scrapping the whole thing. He didn't want to fund it. He didn't think it would work. when he sees his party tearing itself apart, hundreds of bald men scrapping over a single broken comb, doesn't he wish he'd had the courage to stick to his guns?
Taking that one personally.
Well, Mr. Speaker, now, I have absolute conviction that the plan we've put in place will work. Absolute conviction, because I believe it's important that we grip this problem. Now, he spends a lot of his time in this House talking about his time as a lawyer, Mr. Speaker, and I would urge him to listen to them, because Lord Wolfson has said that our bill severely limits the... Four eminent KCs have said that it is undoubtedly the most robust piece of immigration legislation this Parliament has seen, and Mr. Speaker, a former Supreme Court...
the Horizon system robust?
What the Prime Minister's got to say.
Is Lindsay Hall?
Because it matters to my
Lindsay Hall's up
constituents.
and down,
Those who
Rob.
feels it doesn't matter to those. Please leave, Prime Minister.
So he's
As
telling
I
off
said, Mr.
Labour
Speaker.
MPs there.
Four eminent KCs said this is undoubtedly the most robust legislation passed, and a former Supreme Court Justice has been clear that the bill would work. But I know, Mr. Speaker, he's always been more interested in what lefty lawyers have to say, Mr. Speaker. I've even got here the textbook that he authored for them. And it's called, and I quote, European Human Rights Law by Keir Starmer. So...
Well, he's got it printed out. He's waving it around.
So
He's still going. No, Lindsay Hall's intervened again.
Sir, when I stand up, please sit down. Can I just say, we don't use props in this House.
Oh,
and
no
I will
props.
certainly ensure that if you do need reminding, I certainly will. Keir.
Oh, no problem.
It's such utterly pathetic nonsense.
Oh, okay, well, stop won't
there we
blimey,
go.
alright.
Oh, well,
Utterly
you know.
pathetic nonsense. He couldn't be happier saying that.
New year, new nonsense.
Yeah, new year, new nonsense.
Wasn't it?
When you stand on the use of props, Al?
Oh, I'm all for it. I mean, I think, I'll resort to Excel if I need it. You know, we have a projector.
Yeah.
Pointing
I mean, the
today.
thing is, my bar is always well stocked with victuals, so if someone needs some crisps...
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think Parliament's limiting itself here.
Yeah.
If you could... I mean,
You can get a lot in the dispatch box, couldn't you?
You could imagine if he had in there, you know, compromising photographs, everything. I mean, fantastic, wouldn't it?
Well, they could go sort of full whose line is it anyway? And at the start, Lindsay Hoyle gives them, I don't know, like a
Exactly.
big
That's it,
folk
right.
In
snake.
question one, you must use...
Folk
The
snake, and you have to just
aubergine,
keep passing it backwards and
exactly.
forwards.
Yeah. I think I've got a lot of time for that, actually.
We're reaching the stage where they're becoming a sort of estuarial English face-off now.
I mean, he's gonna-
Starmer was like,
Yeah.
he doesn't even, he
don't
hasn't got a
like it.
clue.
He ain't got a clue where they are.
He ain't
has
got a
he?
clue. And Sunak does it too when he's trying to be sort of vaguely.
I mean,
populist.
Sunak he's actually going to get out of Foam Square with one written on it at some point, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
where we're headed with this props thing. Here it is.
Here it is. We are back to square one. We'll get told off for that. Now, on this, as you're here as a professional comedian, Al, let's revisit Keir Starmer's joke. When he sees his party tearing itself apart, hundreds of bold men scrapping over a single broken comb, doesn't he wish he'd had the courage to stick to his guns?
I mean, it's got words in it.
It's got a lot of metaphors.
Yes, and it's sort of...
It needed a comey payoff,
It
didn't it?
pitches up. Yeah, exactly.
Teeth.
Exactly.
Doesn't
I mean,
work in its
well,
own
you know,
terms.
Or something to do with giving into his fringe. You know.
Good.
I mean, we're just. Once you mention that it's Chekhov's comb, isn't it? Once you mention the comb,
have
there's
to
got to be
stick with
some. There's got to be some more hair involved, isn't
Yeah.
there? I mean, it's.
blow
Chekhov's
dries.
gun would be more interesting at this point in the
it
proceedings.
certainly would, yeah. Yes, I mean it's he's. The thing is this isn't what Starmer isn't good at the humour, is he? I mean, Starmer's really like. I know there's no. The polling all says there's no appetite for him, is there? That people aren't really into him, but he's a rail replacement service. I don't want to get on that bus. But I have to get from A to B, so I will get on the bus.
There is no train.
There is no train,
got
exactly. There is no train.
To spend 6 hours with your face just rattling up against the glass.
That's the next Labour
How long have
government.
we been on here? Oh, God, we're only at Salisbury.
The bus that's either way too hot or far too cold.
Yeah.
That's the next Labour government.
Something to look forward to. What are we up to now? Is the next one number 5? Yeah, 2 more to go. Well, let's see if it gets any better. Let's see if there's any more prop work for Rishi Sunak to get. Lindsay Hall just seems very cross with everyone today. Let's go back to the House of Commons. This is question number 5 from Keir Starmer.
It's such utterly pathetic nonsense. He's been brutally exposed by his own MPs yet again. He's got one party chair who says she hopes the Lords will rip his Rwanda deal to pieces. He's got two more who had to quit because they don't think it'll work. All of them appointed by him, all now in open revolt against his policy, each other, and reality. Is there any wonder they all think this gimmick is doomed to failure when the Prime Minister himself doesn't believe in it?
Mr. Speaker, it is rich to hear from the honourable gentleman about belief in something, because it will be news to him. It is actually the case that you can believe in something and stick to that position on this side of the House.
I will say to this side.
Now he's telling off the Tory MPs.
Somebody's chipping in from over. Can I just say it's very important. It's an important day. People want to know what's going on. So I want my constituents, just like yours, to hear what the Prime Minister's got to say. Prime Minister.
Just this week, Mr. Speaker, we had another example of the honourable gentleman doing one thing, saying another, because this week he backed the Home Secretary in banning the terrorist group Hizb ut-Tahrir, despite him personally using the European Court of Human Rights to try and stop them being banned. And don't take my word for it, Mr. Speaker, the extremist's own press release said, and I quote, "the Hizb ut-Tahrir legal team led by Keir Starmer." Now, I know he doesn't like talking about them because they've been a client, but when I see a group chanting jihad on our streets, I ban them, he invoices them.
Wow. That's quite punchy, Tim.
Yes, and the people behind him liked it, which is part of the reason that this whole theatrical enterprise takes place each week. Yeah, I mean, the Tory Central Office, lots of briefing against Starmer's sort of legal backstory, and he's deploying it quite well. I mean, it's a decent line at the end, you know, invoice line.
Is not knowing the details of this case, this is another example of the cab rank rule.
Some of them are cab rank and some of them aren't, and I don't know specifically on this one. Some of them are ones that he just pursued because he sort of believed in doing certain things.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a series of man traps here that they're trying to create for Starmer, isn't there, around his career. But I just don't know. I don't know. It's too late for that now.
Yeah,
is how it feels. And also, we're 5 questions in, and he's finally resorted to this. Yeah, which I think is quite interesting. Is that why would you not? Why would you not start with this if you're Sunak?
But I think that's a comedian's approach. Start with your strong material.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
But in PMQs,
and
you're building
you start with the headline and the intro.
But in PMQs, they tend to there's a sort of crescendo effect.
Towards
the building towards.
And Starmer's petering out a little bit. I mean, there wasn't even really a question there. No. This is a bit like Operation Market Garden, isn't it? I mean, he did all right at Eindhoven, but he's now been stopped.
Look at Jim Gavin. Look at you showing off just because Al Murray's here.
Jeepers. I mean, if we really, you know as well as I do that the fundamental problem there was that the aircraft weren't available for a full first lift effort.
Just fade them out.
And the First Allied Airborne Army were organisationally new, so didn't really have
Gavin.
Anyway, blame Jim Gavin. Yeah.
You can find more of that on what's it called?
We have ways of making you talk.
We have ways of making you talk.
Me and James Holland.
Yes, exactly. It's a podcast. Very good. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons then. This is intervention number 6 from Lindsay Hoyle.
Because there's 8 questions that I think some of you may want. Well, I'll tell you what, there's some's already gone off the list who wanted them. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, if he stuck to his position, he'd be voting with us. His former Home Secretary says the plan won't work. His current Home Secretary calls it batshit. His former Immigration Minister doesn't back his plan.
We'd like to just apologise for the language on Times Radio there.
Doesn't believe in it.
Unbelievable.
And last week, another of his MPs said the Tories should admit that things have got worse since they came to office, that after 14 years they've left Britain less united, the country is a sadder place. If the Prime Minister can't even persuade his own MPs that it's worth supporting him, if he himself doesn't even believe in his own policies, why on earth should anyone else think differently?
Mr. Speaker, another week when it's crystal clear the honourable gentleman doesn't believe in anything and he doesn't have a plan. Now, while he talks the country down, let me update him on what's actually been happening in the past week. Inflation more than halved from 11% to 4%.
But up today.
Real wages rising. Real wages rising for the fifth month in a row. Last week, rates started falling and millions of people benefited from a tax cut worth £450. So while he takes us back to square one with a £28 billion tax grab, let's stick with a plan that's delivering a brighter future for Britain.
No long-term decisions.
No long-term decisions. Now, we're now talking about brighter future.
Brighter futures without long-term decisions.
A brighter future rather than the gloomy business we're currently avoiding. Yeah, we also must apologise about the potty-mouthed leader of the opposition, Keir.
Unbelievable.
It's great, though, isn't it? You can't wave a piece of paper around, but you can.
I mean, how long's that been?
I think
when
actually,
did that become parliamentary language?
I think we established that batshit was okay, wasn't it? It's.
Oh, you said it again. I'm really sorry, Mum.
I know.
I mean, this is why you don't normally listen to this show, Mum. I understand.
Yeah, apparently it's fine. It's on the Ofcom rules. It's fine.
But the thing. But when did that start being a word you could say in Parliament?
It's a good question. I think it's when the Home Secretary was being accused of.
Woe betide you if you call someone a liar, however.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Or have a printout of a document.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. So, what do we think overall after all that? Are we any the wiser? So, I suppose there were several questions. Like, what's the purpose of PMQs? Is it to land a new news story? Has Keir Starmer generated a new news story?
Nah.
No. Has he inserted himself into the news story?
Nah,
not really.
He's trying to stir the pot with the other side,
but there were no real punchy sort of questions that would have divided Sunak from his, from the people rebelling.
And actually, if he'd done that thing, we've talked about this before, because he had all the quotes there that Lee Anderson and Kevin Bain and other things said. If he just read out what they'd said and said, "What do you say to him?" Yeah, really sort of. Tried to exacerbate that friction. But
the Labour seem to be in a don't interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake mode, aren't they? That's what they've been. They've sort of hibernated, having to take any action, haven't they? For the last few months, it's been pretty much set on that direction of travel, isn't it? And while if the Tory party's going to tear itself apart, why change the story?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought what's interesting, obviously, as you said, Tim, is that quite clearly there's an attack line emerging. Just calling him a lefty lawyer isn't enough, but being able to hang it on who he's worked for, which is obviously partly why they banned them this week. Clearly, is to why ban them now?
It's like George Osborne used to spend £1 million in a budget just for a joke, and they've now banned Hizbut Tahrir to give them a line at PMQ.
Well, don't you think? Yeah. I mean, why? What's different?
I mean, the single problem with that is that I don't think many people in the UK know what Hizbut Tahrir is, and know whether or not we should be banning it, or whether or not he should have.
No, they were much bigger news back around time of 9/11 and all that. They never seldom out of the news, and they didn't get banned then. But
Tom's been in touch on the YouTube channel. It says Rishi Sunak missed the obvious alliteration in his last retort. It should have been "I ban them, he bills them." A pro like Al wouldn't have let that pass.
I think that's a very, very good point, and that is basically when they do this all again tomorrow. They'll
be better on the second night.
The second night. I mean, this is obviously always permanently work in progress.
Yeah. Everything's work in progress. So we'll talk about Al's tour, which is coming shortly, and how he's getting on writing his. I suspect better than I am with writing mine. We'll also find out about the best of the rest. Yes, maybe some of the backbench questions were better. Did Lindsay Hoyle ever get to them? We'll find out. Lara Spirit will be here next, here on Times Radio.
Politics without the boring bits. Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
Perfection. Matched. Passion. Driven. Alfa Romeo. A one-of-a-kind spirit. It's meant to be. 0% APR with 35% deposit. 3 years complimentary servicing across the range. Your soulmate, awaits. Visit your Alfa Romeo retailer today.
Personal contract purchase, 35% deposit required. T's and C's, subject to status, Stellantis Financial Services. 3 options at the end of the agreement. Part exchange, pay the final payment to own the vehicle or return the vehicle.
Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday. And right now, you can save £50 per person. That's £100 off per couple. So escape to sunny favourites like Greece, Portugal and Italy. And spread the cost with flexible monthly payments. Book now with just a £60 deposit per person. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. Abtranational protected. Subject to availability and conditions.
Aisha Hazarika's Culture Hour. Get your cultural fix every Sunday at 6 p.m. Politics without the boring bits. Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
Very good artist, Matt Chorley on Times Radio. It was like Zoo Radio in here, isn't it? It's got Tim Shipman's here, comedian Al Murray's
here.
Crew.
Yeah. Do we clap you between
a posse.
Do we have to laugh aggressively at all your jokes like they do in Zoo Radio?
Yeah. And then straight after the show, we're going to go on an 8-hour bender. Very good. Lara Spirit's now here.
Hello.
Lara, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. So I trailed ahead that you were here because you were going to really sum up all of the great questions in the backbenches. Sum up for us what they were like.
Really boring today, I'm afraid.
Sold!
No, I've told you about this.
I know, you've
We've
given
had
me
so
quite
many
a strict
meetings.
edict on this.
You're supposed to pick them up.
But I think...
Isn't this because people want boring now? That's what we keep being told. People want boring now. We've had too much of the flashy nonsense.
Not in this form. Not when there was so many questions of please come to my constituency, please say thank you to this person, please agree that this thing I've done is really good.
Well, that's all right, because we keep being told, mainly in the Sunday Times, that Rishi Sunak is so good with people, and when he meets them in person...
You've not been told that by the Sunday Times. You've been told that people in Downing Street believe that to be the case.
Yes. I mean, that's, what, 30 million people he's got to shake hands with?
Exactly. Shake their hands individually.
But I remember when the Tory party was telling us that Ian Duncan Smith being really dull was a good thing because people want boring now.
Yeah.
But the quiet man never found the volume control, did he?
So, based on that then, Lara, after this stellar build-up...
I've done my best.
Who are we doing?
Of course, we're going to Stephen Flynn first.
Hurrah!
SNP.
Another bold man.
Another
bold man fighting.
Did he find his comb?
Did he find out?
When I listened to that out there, I was like, Matt's going to absolutely love that comment. Yeah. And you guys will talk about it for a little while. So I'm afraid that I missed it. But yeah, Stephen Flynn, we're going to first with a not untypical question about the cost of living and the Conservatives' response to it.
Here we go.
Mr. Speaker, when people woke up today in homes that they can't afford to heat with mortgages that they're struggling to pay, to news that inflation is once again on the rise, they'll have looked to Westminster for answers. And instead they find a UK government which is tearing itself apart over how quickly it can send vulnerable people on a plane to Rwanda. Surely the Prime Minister must understand that the anger that some of his own backbenchers have towards him is no comparison to the anger that the public have towards his party.
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, if the honourable gentleman did care about supporting working families to pay their bills, to pay their mortgage, why on earth is the SNP making Scotland the highest tax part of the United Kingdom, where the average, Mr. Speaker, not the wealthiest, where the average worker in Scotland is now paying more tax than they do in England?
That strikes me as quite a good point.
Yeah, I mean, what's that gif of the terrible person makes reasonable point?
Yeah. Should we see what? I mean, I assume that Stephen Flynn just completely ignores that response.
Yeah, he does completely.
Should we have a listen? Yeah, that's where you go.
Stephen Flynn. Of course, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the Rwanda Bill, the reality is that if you want to stop the smuggling gangs...
The other thing he does, because he came on the show to talk about this, he puts his hands in his pockets while he's doing it.
Yes.
Because it annoys Tory MPs.
Yes, but that's also an old stand-up confidence trick. That if you put your hands in your pockets, it makes you feel relaxed. So you then relax on stage. That's an old body language loop you can do for yourself if you're on stage and you think you're starting to sweat and you get the dry mouth. Put your hands in your pockets. Because relaxed people have their hands in their pockets and they think you're relaxed. You think you're relaxed.
I'm making a note of that.
So, I mean, I only brought that up because... you're about to go on the road and...
Throughout.
I know what to look for now.
Yeah. Oh, it's going very badly.
2 hours with his hands in his pocket.
Fingers coming out the bottom of my trousers. That's so deep.
I mean, he has the vibe of, some sort of hectic drama when suddenly a very calm young, but bald, in a well-suited Scotsman turns up and goes, basically, in the end, if you carry on like this, things could get quite sticky for you.
It's like sinister.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, he has that air.
Perhaps he could be hired by one of the 5 Tory mafia families.
Yeah, he could. He could. Lara, who are we going to next?
We are going to Nick Fletcher next.
Oh, we're a big fan of Nick Fletcher.
Who talks about both wanting a minister for men, which we know is a
minister, surely. Come on, I mean, this is rubbish.
a long-standing concern of his.
So Nick Fletcher once used a Commons debate to say the reason that young men were turning to crime was because there were too many women on the telly. And the
It's
female,
an opinion.
the female Doctor Who and the female Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
He literally said, is it any wonder that so many young men are turning to crime? So
I mean, the female Ghostbusters wasn't very good, but it didn't make me rob a petrol station.
Well, give it time.
But this is a perfect example of a question where he is both trying to advocate for that and also trying to ask for some sort of congratulation over some constituency-related matter or visit. So have a listen to how he fails to do that.
You can pull it off.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, today I was unsure whether to raise a national issue, such as the desperate need for a Minister for Men, or a local issue, such as Doncaster's need for a new hospital or Edlington for a new leisure centre. But I thought the best thing I could do is ask the Prime Minister to come and have a tour of Doncaster. And while I'm showing him around my hometown, I can press the need for a Minister for Men, I can show him the site for a new hospital, and I can introduce him to the people of Edlington so he can discuss their new leisure centre. So will the Prime Minister accept my invitation?
Well, thanks
Imagine having to accept that
to my
invitation.
honourable friend's fantastic campaigning on behalf of his constituents. Doncaster City Council has received, I think, more than £80 million in levelling up funding to support its regeneration products. And most recently, Doncaster has been awarded £20 million in our long-term plan for towns.
This pre-planned
which I know he is working very hard to make sure is prioritised.
Is he going to go there?
For local people. I would be delighted to discuss those projects and his other ideas when I come and visit him as soon as my diary allows.
As soon as my diary allows.
Well, that'll be
He's
after
a very
the
busy
election.
man.
Exactly. He'll have a very clear diary.
I like the mention of the leisure centre, though, because the voice reminded me of nothing so much as the guy who went, in 1984, nobody died.
Oh, yeah, the Steve
In
Coogan
1985, nobody died. In 1986, somebody died. In 1987, nobody died.
I was reminded of that when Rishi Sunak was going around saying that 95% of schools weren't falling down because of flat concrete. That's all right then. I mean,
It's fine.
Yeah. What did you think of the question construction from Nick Fletcher?
Well, I mean, in that thriller we were talking about, he's the bloke who's hopelessly out of his depth, having like ordinary bloke running a leisure centre who's hopelessly out of his depth, and that Scotch bloke turns up to tell him things might get sticky. And we're starting to piece together.
Wandered into the leisure centre where they're organising the heist.
Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you need MPs like that so that the ones on the front benches can shine so bright.
That's true. It's all relative.
It's all relative, yeah.
Very good. Well, this is still extraordinarily PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Where are we going next, Lara Spirit?
So if we have time, it'd be great to go to Charlotte Nichols for a less amusing question, but this is about the worrying shortage of drugs that we're seeing in pharmacies, and I think the response from Sunak is quite interesting on what the government hopes to do next.
Right.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I've been contacted by disparate constituents who have rung every single pharmacy within a 50-mile radius of Warrington and still haven't been able to access their medication for ADHD. This has been going on for months and isn't just a Warrington issue. Pharmacists are calling it the worst shortage ever seen, with only 11% of people able to access their full dose this month. And ADHD UK have called the government's response pathetic. They're right, aren't they?
Yeah. So I'm very sorry to hear about the situation in the Honourable Lady's constituency, but the Health Secretary obviously heard what she said and is in touch with the relevant drug bodies to make sure we can have the provision of ADHD medicine to all of those who need it.
It was interesting that Victoria Atkins, who is the Health Secretary, is on the front bench, sort of leaning forward. She looked
nodding aggressively.
Nodding aggressively, like this might be the first time it's
come to
reached her attention. But anyway, I suppose that's a good example of someone using PMQs for good, Lara.
Yeah, I would say that was one of the questions which stayed true to the purpose of Prime Prime Minister's questions, which is to actually ask a question.
Keep the arse out of this frat house, though, isn't it?
Which is a
Your
relatively
Zoom
low
radio
bar.
isn't serving to Zoom now.
But I think the statistics she cited there was staggering. What was it? 11% of those on ADHD medication have been unable to get it. But also,
what's causing this? Do we know?
I think various supply chain issues that I haven't heard any minister.
You see, because I mean, one of the interesting things is here we are. We've had the leader of the opposition's questions. There is a global supply chain question hanging over everything with the Red Sea and with the
Is
Royal
it
Navy
Brexit or the Houthis? That's the question. Isn't it?
Well, exactly. The Red, that they were scrabbling around in the Rwanda mud for 3 or 4 questions when there's actually Royal Navy's engaged in military action in Yemen. Like, why are we not talking about that?
And why have you got Al Murray on and he's not been asked to talk about the war?
No, but quite seriously, because last week over the weekend, all this talk about there's been military action without consulting Parliament and the rights and wrongs of that, but it's not been mentioned, and I find that maybe it will be later on in the backbenchers question, but I find it sort of the sort of fundamental unseriousness in that regard quite surprising. And suddenly there's a serious question about a serious issue that affects people, and Sunak stops like laughing or trying to land blows and engages with it seriously. And I think, that's the thing in the end where I think, we've got a kind of frivolity problem.
I find it a little bit shocking that you don't think we need a minister for men now, Al.
Well, of course.
Is it not specifically a minister for men in leisure centres?
Oh, I don't know.
Whose job it was to get more men into leisure centres.
But it has to be. I mean, it's got to be a minister, hasn't it? And when Labour get in, they should appoint one and make a woman minister for men, and then we can hear the explosion. The windows will rattle when the news reaches him.
I'm not sure he'll be representing Doncaster after the election, to be honest.
I've got half an answer to the question because apparently the shortage of medicines is affecting people with ADHD, diabetes, cancer treatments, HRT. It's a combination of manufacturing problems, missing key ingredients, and global demand putting pressure on supplies, according to the Royal Pharmaceutical Society.
Right.
And it's just getting worse, apparently.
Gosh.
And as a result, pharmacists are facing aggression and abuse from frustrated and anxious customers. So there we are. Well, I feel like, unusually, I feel like I've learned something. So thank you for that, Lara Spirit.
Thank you, Matt.
What time will you be in people's inboxes,
3
Lara
p.m.
Spirit? 3 p.m, Lara Spirit with the red box PMQs Unpacked email. Up next, we'll find out why Al is actually here and how you can come and see him doing it properly in a theatre near you. We'll do that next on Times Radio.
Kate Borsay, tonight from 8 on Times Radio.
We've got a second day of amendments on the government's Rwanda Bill before MPs have to decide whether to vote for or against the bill itself. We'll be speaking to Conservative MP and member of the Home Affairs Committee, Tim Lawton. We're also joined by Jason